Hey, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I just put a thing in the chat that while everyone enters from the waiting room, we would love it if you could share what town you're from and what your connection is to historic preservation, just so we can kind of see who is joining us today. We'll get started in a moment. Great, so welcome everyone. Today, the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and Preservation Mass are excited to welcome all of you to the Eastern Massachusetts Historical Commission Coalition, or EMHCC. The meeting, which is from bylaw to action, understanding demolition, delay, and implementation. I'm Lindsay Randall. I'm the MAPC rep for the Historical Commission, and I'm joined by my colleague Jen Doherty from MHC. And I believe Jeff Gagnon is somewhere on the line, or he will be joining us shortly. He has been traveling, but he is from Preservation Mass and does this coalition with us. And today we are excited to be joined by Patty Keller of Salem, Ryan Hayward of Medford, and Peter Johnson of Hanover. So Patty is going to be talking about refining your bylaw and ordinance. Ryan will be focusing on the documentation during the delay process. And finally, Peter will be sharing a demolition delay success story. And during our presentations, if you have comments or questions, you can just put them in the chat. And at the end of all three presentations, we will have a time for Q&A, which I will also sort of reiterate the questions to our speakers. We are not, everyone is on mute just to make this meeting go as smoothly as possible. And everything. And then the meeting, just for clarification, is being recorded, and the presentations will be posted to the MAPC YouTube page and posted to the Eastern Massachusetts Historical Commission Coalition page, which is on the MAPC website. And with that, Patty, I will turn it over to you. Patty is the preservation planner with the City of Salem.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Lindsay. Let me share my screen. Oh, hold on a second. Let's see. Here we go. Let's try this again.
As we were saying in Zoom land,
yeah.
Always is.
I thought I had this down. Hold on. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me.
It is still in. I see the other screen. Yes, perfect.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, Lindsay. Good morning, everyone. As Lindsay mentioned, I'm Patty Kelleher, and I am the Historic Preservation Planner for the City of Salem. This is a role I have served in since 2016, when I was hired as the city's first preservation planner. I hope you all won't mind, but I'm going to read my notes. I have a lot to cover, and I just don't want to miss anything today. Salem is a community blessed with an abundance of historic resources and residents who have worked tirelessly to protect the city's heritage. Today, the city has 4 local historic districts protecting more than 600 properties. But despite these designations, many historic buildings, including National Register listed historic resources, remain vulnerable to inappropriate alteration and even demolition. Salem adopted its first demolition delay regulation in 1986. The ordinance was a single page, which is shown on the screen, that was part of the responsibilities of the building inspector or director of public property. For decades, the Historical Commission relied on these regulations to alert them of proposals to demolish an historic building outside of the local historic districts, in order to encourage owners to find an alternative to demolition, in order to preserve the historic building. When development pressures were low in the city, this ordinance was relatively effective, with only a few demolitions proposed each year. However, as demolition pressures in the city grew, this tool became increasingly ineffective as ongoing building demolition and building expansion threatened the architectural character of the city and its historic neighborhoods. When the city updated its historic preservation plan in 2015, it recognized the deficiencies of the demo delay ordinance and identified strengthening it as a high priority. Salem's original ordinance imposed only a 6-month delay for threatened buildings older than 50 years that were found historically significant by the commission. Under this ordinance, the delay clock began upon submission of the waiver application, which reduced what was already a very limited delay period. In some instances, applicants would request repeated continuations for their application, waiting out the clock and further eroding the 6 months. The language in the ordinance was minimal as well. There was no definition of demolition. It left this up to the discretion of the building inspector to determine whether a building project was subject to review under the ordinance. City building officials repeatedly made the determination that demolition occurred only when the entire building, including the foundation, was demolished. In addition, the ordinance had no submission requirements and no specified process for the commission to review applications. There was also no requirement that the review be conducted under a public hearing process. The commission did have some success with preventing demolition under the old ordinance. The images on the screen show the historic Ropes House, one success story that the commission had under the old ordinance. But this only happened when the commission intervened during the zoning review process after the 6-month delay had expired. The result was a preserved historic building while also allowing the owner to construct a new building at the rear of the double lot. The building inspector's interpretation of demolition resulted in an alarming number of development projects that proposed significant alterations to historic buildings, including the removal of most of a building's walls and roofs while retaining just enough structure to avoid meeting the threshold definition of demolition. When these projects did not trigger demo delay review, the commission sought to intervene through the development review process of other regulatory boards, such as the Zoning Board of Appeals or Planning Board, but there was no formal requirement that developers meet with the commission to consider alternatives that would preserve the historic building. The increasing frequency of projects that were able to avoid the demo delay process further emphasized the need to strengthen this ordinance. The Victorian era cottage on the screen, a contributing resource in the Salem Willows National Register Historic District, was perhaps a tipping point on the need to revise Salem's demo delay ordinance. Shortly after acquiring the house, the owner removed all but a small section of the building in order to elevate it for a new basement and construct a large addition on the rear. This alteration did not trigger demo delay, and the commission was not even aware of the project until most of the building was removed. Fortunately, in this case, the owner chose to retain the overall character of the building with a new traditional front porch and decorative gable trim, but the outcome could have been so much worse. And I realize as I'm looking at the screen now, I didn't do an after of the project in the Salem Willows, but the porch was recreated with the lattice on the bottom. Next time I will make sure to include an after. After the Willows project, Salem's local nonprofit advocacy group, Historic Salem Inc., HSI, joined forces with the commission to advocate for updating the demolition delay ordinance. Commission staff researched other demo delay bylaws and ordinances on the North Shore and throughout Massachusetts and reviewed EMHCC's model bylaw. Using these examples, we drafted a revised ordinance to strengthen the regulation and provide more opportunities for protecting Salem's historic buildings. We worked with the building inspector and the city solicitor on the language for the new ordinance and provided them a final draft for review before making the draft document public. Since the building inspector would be tasked with upholding the ordinance, it was important to gain his support for the revisions. While the city drafted the ordinance, HSI reached out to city councilors to provide information on the revisions and to answer any questions. This effort was critical to build support for the revisions as the city council approves all city ordinances. Public outreach was also important. We created a fact sheet, part of which is shown on the screen now, to explain the proposed changes and why they were needed. We reached out to several historic building owners to ask for their support and for their permission to highlight their properties as a reason to revise the ordinance. This includes the Daniels House, shown on the screen, an iconic 17th century historic landmark in Salem that is unprotected and could have been significantly altered or even demolished under the original demo delay regulation once a short 6-month delay period had expired. In 2021, Salem's revised demolition delay ordinance was unanimously approved by the city council. The new ordinance, which is multiple pages now, included a number of revisions, such as the following: a new definition section that includes definitions for what is a significant building and for what constitutes demolition. The term significant building includes buildings that may not be significant on their own, but are an integral part of a series of like buildings that document a historical period, such as a streetscape of 1.5-story gabled workers' cottages. The demolition definition clearly defines what constitutes demolition under the ordinance. Any proposal to remove more than 50% of a building's roof and/or walls are subject to review. This is expanded further to capture any removal of 50% of a roof and/or walls that are visible from a public way, and includes a cumulative removal of wall or roof features that occur within a 5-year time period. The new ordinance extends the delay period. Now, any building that is between 50 and 99 years is subject to a 12-month delay, while any building that is older than 100 years is subject to an 18-month delay. This provides a greater amount of time for the commission to work with owners to find alternatives to demolition, and provides greater incentives for owners to come to the table and not wait out the clock. This clock now starts at the commission's decision to invoke the delay, not when an application is filed, like in the old ordinance. The revisions also define a clear articulation of the 2-step process for considering whether to grant a waiver or invoke the delay. Step 1, determining whether the building is significant. Does it meet the definition for significant building as defined in the ordinance? And if determined significant, is the building preferably preserved? Other revisions in the ordinance included tying the waiver to the current owner. A new owner would have to start the process all over again. A requirement that owners must secure their buildings during the delay period, and that the commission is allowed to impose a fine of up to $300 a day for any violations of the ordinance. Today, the ordinance is capturing more alteration projects that could significantly impact Salem's historic buildings and streetscapes, including the removal of historic roof structures and the expansion of buildings through large dormers and large additions. It isn't just the entire removal of a building that impacts our historic architecture. The loss of historic scale, form, and character-defining features also erode Salem's heritage and sense of place. The opportunity for the commission to engage in a dialogue with building owners has resulted in many owners and developers reconsidering their initial proposal for demolition. The image on the screen shows a Victorian-era cottage and the original design plan to remove more than 50% of the building roof and walls. In fact, The proposal called for removal of the entire roof to add an additional story, as well as a removal of walls and alteration of the building facade while keeping the building foundation. This project triggered demolition delay review under the new ordinance. Through the demo delay process, the owner met with the commission at a public hearing where neighbors provided feedback on the proposal. Since a building is located in the National Register Historic District, it met the definition for a historic building, significant building. After a review of the proposed building changes, the commission found the building preferably preserved and encouraged the owner to consider design alternatives that would preserve more of the historic building. Through this dialogue, the owners and their architect agreed to modify their plans by retaining the building's original steep gable roof and front porch element, design elements that were character-defining features of this historic building, and features that were repeated on buildings throughout the surrounding streetscape. With the new ordinance, the commission quickly discovered that just because the ordinance had been revised and strengthened didn't mean that the work was over. Enforcement became an issue. There were times that building projects were inadvertently proceeding through the permitting process without triggering commission review, despite meeting the threshold for demo delay under the new ordinance. To address this, the commission requested that demo delay be integrated into the city's building permit and development review processes. Now, demo delay is a step in the online permitting system for building permits, special permits and variances, and site plan review. There is a flag in the system for building construction date, and projects that include demo in the description cannot move through the permitting process without sign-off from the commission. Oh, I'm just going to go back one if I can figure out how to do that. I did want to just talk about a few other next steps, some challenges that the commission is looking at addressing as we move forward. One is how to calculate whether a project is removing 50% of a wall or roof, and who makes this calculation. Right now, is it the building inspector, the owner, the commission? Right now, flagging it as it goes through the system, and if it appears that it's meeting that threshold for 50% removal, I work with the property owner to get them through the demolition delay process. Better to be safe than sorry. So that's how we're addressing it now, but it's something that we need to look at for the future. Also, another thing to address is, what does preferably preserved mean? While defined in the ordinance as any significant building, the commission finds in the public interest to preserve. In practice, this is not as easy to define. We're working on a new definition and are researching how other communities define this in their ordinances. Also, addressing the capacity of the commission. Before the ordinance was revised, the commission was reviewing 2 to 3 demo delay applications a year. Now, the commission is reviewing 10 to 15 applications annually, on top of administering design review for 600 properties in the local historic districts. And also, the commission needs to remember that demo delay is just that. It's just a temporary stay on demolition, and there's a lot more work involved to further protect the buildings as they move through the process. Thank you all. My contact information is on the screen, and I believe EMHCC will be distributing that as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions at the end of our presentations. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. And yes, on our landing page, we will have contact information for all of our speakers. And we will be sharing a follow-up email with the Zoom link and everything to everyone else. So for our second presentation, we are going to be joined by Ryan Hayward, who is president at the Preservation Collaborative and the vice chair of the Medford Historical Commission. So correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, you have been the chair before too. You just...
I have been the chair. I was the chair for I think 5 years, and then I gave it up. Then I was chair again for another 2 years, and then I now have somebody else in that position, Jennifer Keenan, who is the current chair. Lindsay, you can hear me, correct?
I can, though
Okay,
I
great.
do
All right.
not see a cat. I was hoping to see the
Yeah,
cat.
he's sleeping, not today, unfortunately. So I just wanted to let everybody know that at some point he may walk across the screen. All right, thanks everybody. Good morning. My name is Ryan Hayward. I am a 16-year veteran of the Medford Historical Commission. I'll be touching upon the many forms of mitigation that take place during the brief pause that is demolition delay. So Medford has a strong 18-month demolition delay for buildings that are older than 75 years. And in the city of Medford, that's the majority of structures. Touching upon what was just said, originally the delay was 6 months, but it was really ineffective. Applicants would simply just build this into their timeline, and they would often get away with what we call the facadectomy, where they would leave one wall standing, they'd leave a foundation in, and then they would build a ginormous building and claim that it wasn't any sort of demolition, like the building that's shown on this slide, which is 51 Fulton Street. And this particular building was the trigger to change from 6 months to 18 months. We got a number of people in our community to advocate for strengthening the demolition delay, and after much public outcry, we have the chance to catch not only full-scale demolitions, but got rehabs, roof removals, and projects that leave one wall standing. And the length of the delay is really a strong incentive to work with the commission to come to some resolution sooner or later. There are many different options that we explore, and each building is different, so the course of the delay is unique to each building before us. So each and every review begins with the creation of an MHC inventory form if one does not already exist. Citywide, only a fraction of our built landscape is recorded, so this is a common occurrence. Medford hires a preservation consultant to prepare the summary of the building, and we worked with the city to make sure that we're in compliance to meet all the procurement rules and regulations, and we receive a city budget to help expedite the process. So the inventory form requires a minimum amount of information to be recorded for each and every building. And we feel that this is fair to both the buildings that we're reviewing and the applicants that put forth their proposals for demolition. And the commission uses this information to make their determination. Medford has a similar two-step process where we review for significance, and then we determine if it's in the public interest to preserve the building and see it rehabilitated rather than demolished. No matter what the outcome, the form ends up sent to the Massachusetts Historical Commission, and it ends up on MACRIS so that there's a record, and the commissioners utilize the information on MACRIS during the demo delay review period to find a multitude of answers to questions that come up during review. So it's important to have this basic information available. I know our planning department also uses it, the state uses it, so it's great to be able to provide information as part of the demolition delay review process. If a delay is imposed on a structure, it pauses the project and forces the applicant to think critically about that very final act that is demolition. And in Medford, we refer to any sort of solution that avoids demolition as mitigation. And in Medford, we've explored almost every measure that's available to us, and we're happy to share some of our successes and losses with you. There's certainly no one type fits all for items. Buildings are unique, and what you ask of an applicant should be tailored to the specific proposal before you. And it takes time to implement these processes. But the more you implement them, the better the projects come out. So my case in point is this building on this slide, which is 104 Winchester Street. Commission advocated for nearly a year during the 18-month demo delay that the developer save this building, and they originally did not want to save it, but after seeing many different projects around this site save other buildings, the applicant came back to us with a proposal that actually works to save this building and incorporates it into a much larger process. They own the building next door that will be demolished, but we're saving the older of the two buildings. So it's great to see that it all will work out and that it people are incorporating these. So that's important to keep pushing forward and keep asking more out of your proposers to make sure that you get better projects. So one of the original goals of our bylaw was to advocate for the sale of buildings to somebody who would rehabilitate the structure. So 21 Water Street is an important mid-19th century building. It was purchased by a real estate developer who intended to tear down the building and put up basically a nondescript duplex in its place. And in their words, the house needed far more repairs than they were willing to pay for. So the commission imposed a delay, recommended that the building be put up for sale, and it was sold in less than 2 weeks to a family that was looking to move to Medford. And after a new coat of paint, they moved in and they've lived there for more than a decade. So this is one of the few wins that occurred during our 6-month demo delay. This particular building was also one of the reasons for change. So the Mary Kay O'Sullivan was an important labor activist who sought to achieve a better standard of living for working class men and women in the early 20th century. She built this beautiful home at 541 Winthrop Street, high atop a hill that overlooked the neighborhood. And next door to this was a stone cottage built by her longtime defense attorney and his wife at 551 Winthrop Street. So both houses and 3 others were purchased by a developer who was looking to cut in a road and build several new dwellings. We asked them to provide cost estimates to renovate the building, and once these seemed plausible, given their condition, we worked with them to devise a plan that would turn the buildings into a focal point for development and not lessen the number of new buildings that were going on here. So we wanted to demonstrate that preservation need not be the enemy, that we can certainly incorporate old buildings into new schemes. But unfortunately, the fire department and the planning board both rejected those ideas, and it forced the developer to change course. So some 8 years after their demolition, this is a very similar view showing what has happened to this particular site. We call it the Great Hole of Medford. And what's being proposed here is 10 new houses, all of cookie cutter design, but they're going to be built on Mary Kenny O'Sullivan Way, which is the only reminder of her presence there. So we always encourage the reuse of our older buildings. When applicants come to us, they often assume that we're asking them to restore. What we ask of them, though, is a serious thought be given to see if projects can save historic fabrics. Sometimes it can be saved. So in the case of this 1880s Queen Anne Victorian at 18 Walnut Street, it had a stunning transformation that resulted in its ultimate restoration. The restoration also includes the entire interior, which is, although it's out of our jurisdiction, it was entirely saved. And we have lots of projects that come to us looking to save the existing building with changes. So 152 Summer Street was an Italianate on a corner lot that needed a few additions to convert it over into a multi-unit residential complex. So the developers carefully considered all sides of the building as they made changes, and with a new coat of paint, it brought out all the architectural elements. So the commission is really happy with the results of this particular building, and the unit sold in less than 2 weeks, again after their listing, showing that preservation does not make the building any less desirable. Rehabilitation can sometimes involve additions and changes to floor plan. So in the case of this house at 75 Cluley, the commission worked with the developer to push back a large addition that's barely shown on the right-hand side of the new image at right. And it allowed the main forward building and the streetscape to remain the same. In the commission's view, demo delay properties are not in historic districts, so there's more of a balancing act to maintaining integrity for the sake of highlighting historical significance rather than preserving every individual architectural element. In many cases that come before the commission, demolition delay results in design review, and it can save a building from irreversible harm. So a good case in point is 33 Vine Street. It's an Italianate dwelling located in the Shipyard Workers District. So a developer purchased the building and proposed extensive changes to the structure to the point where it would no longer be recognizable. So on the left is the proposed rendering we received with the demolition delay packet, and what was built finally after much collaboration with the commission is on the right. So the proponent's architect changed the massing to preserve the forward structure, and as a result, the streetscape remained the same and changes were removed to the rear. It resulted in the elimination of a large fire escape, and using those savings, they recreated all the historic trim on the outside of the building, restoring its appearance. So this was a win for everybody. It's a duplex and it's fully occupied. Changes can certainly be more dramatic, such as this Queen Anne Victorian at 130 Boston Ave. It maintained as much of its original fabric, but it was really tired, and it was an important example of architecture built by a well-known local builder, and using modern materials such as AZEK, hardy board, and vinyl siding, the owners were able to recreate much of the original flavor of the building. We have seen projects shy away from demolition when preservation funds are made example. So Medford's first tax credit project was the Pinkham Octagonal House, mid 19th century structure that sits on a large lot at the end of Brooks Park. The building was an income producing property, and the owners took advantage of the preservation dollars, and the property is protected by a preservation easement as a result of this work. And we encourage applicants to seek out community preservation funding. We recently had an applicant who applied for the demolition of her carriage house, 91 Winchester Street. She was not aware that there were other alternatives, so she sought out contractors for estimates for repair and is actively seeking alternative funding sources to repair the building rather than demolish it. For very special buildings you're willing to go the distance for, there is the local historic district creation process. So our commission teamed up with the HDC to try to save the Haskell Cutter House located at 16 Foster Court. It was a very important 1804 cape that was a rare survivor in the densely built up shipbuilding neighborhoods along the Mystic River. Its location on a large lot made it the target for a multi-unit residential complex, and the developer refused to engage with any mitigation, so the commissions mounted a strong campaign, had over 500 persons turn out in support of the district, but unfortunately, City Council was unwilling to support the proposal despite its overwhelming importance to the neighborhood, city, and Commonwealth. So the demolition delay offers the critical pause in the creation of local districts. They can be accomplished in as little as 6 months, but speaking from experience, they take much longer. So the longer your delay is, the better you have chance for success. This brings me to my most important mitigation measure, which is documentation. It is important to draw, photograph, and investigate the buildings which are about to undergo significant transformations or total demolitions. So this is a preservation effort to capture information that might otherwise get lost. And our star example is the Gibbs Homestead, an important mid-19th century dwelling house at 333 Winthrop Street. By the time it was acquired by developers, the property was medical offices. So the commission specifies the product we're looking for, and the applicant hires a commission-approved consultant. It is important to have somebody knowledgeable and capable of completing this work. The building was researched, although it was not exhaustive, but it includes a title search, which revealed information about the earliest owners and builders. And during the research, historic images such as the one at the right here came out to understand how the building changed over time. So floor plans and elevations were prepared for each of the structures. It also includes a carriage house that was at the back of the property. And the exterior and interior are then entirely photographed with images labeled as what they record. For those buildings which are being demolished and likely to contain information about their evolution, we undertake what is called architectural archaeology. So by selecting sites around the building, layers are peeled back to learn more. And in the case of this particular room, we thought that there was a hearth in this location. So not only were we able to find it, but we recorded the 4 different changes that happened to the room over its long history. It was a dining room, originally had a wood-burning fireplace. It was sealed up to include a heating stove. Then it later had a kitchen hearth. And then finally, it was entirely blocked up when it became medical offices in the 1930s. Once this architectural information is captured, it's interpreted, and of course it gives us phase drawings that tell the history of the building. And the plan on the left shows the original floor plan that shows what the building looked like. It was a really unique building to Medford. And then for those buildings which are extra important to us, our volunteers sometimes take the added step of doing historic renderings. In this case, it gives us a full mock-up of what that building looked like when it was originally built. And capturing all this information is important because once it's gone, it's lost forever. So the Gibbs homestead was demolished and a new garage with an attached house was built in its place. So 2 other houses of similar design were also built on the lot. Now, documentation can prove useful during the delay because it produces really accurate and detailed information that can sometimes sway a developer in a different direction. So in the case of 130 Boston Ave that you guys saw previously, we received the architectural drawings at Wright that showed what the developer wanted to do, but he became really interested in changing his design once he saw the documentation drawings, which are produced at left, to really get a flavor for the building and really wanted to recreate some of that architectural flavor using modern materials. So that's why it's important to have these accurate, this accurate information. And it can also start a movement towards saving the building. So in the case of 6 Rockwell, there was a grassroots effort to purchase and move the building somewhere else in the city, hit local papers, there was a GoFundMe set up, and some money was raised towards preservation efforts. But the house was in rough shape, and unfortunately they fell flat. But what it did do for us, it did create a record, and it's important to document that change. So coming full circle, we make sure to record the buildings if they come down, sharing this information, sharing the inventory forms of what was there, and sharing what replaced it creates a record in itself. So here is 6 Rockwell coming down, and here is the building that replaces it. And there's something gut-wrenching about a machine tearing through the heart of a building. The emotion it evokes can sometimes be strong, and using their losses demonstrates why it's important and what's at stake for our community. So the commission feels that the demo delay works. Since enacting the delay, we've seen fewer total demolitions and more that make changes to incorporate older housing stock. Mitigation drives better projects. So we have pushed our community builders to think critically about how they use these buildings to their advantage. And they don't sit on their hands because waiting for 18 months is just not feasible for them. And this pause has saved more buildings in the last 5 years than it has during the entire duration of the 1993 to 2018 before the bylaw change. So we believe that it works. And that's it.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Ryan. There was a lot of good questions that came in the chat during that. So after we hear from Peter, we will get to those. So up next, we have Peter Johnson, who has an extensive background in design, particularly in the field of museums. And he is also the chair of the Hanover Historical Commission. And he's going to be talking about, the title is Demolishing the Joseph House to Save It. And that is not a misnomer. There are 2 houses, so in the title.
Well, hello, everyone. I am hoping I'm going to easily be able to share my screen with you. Let's see here. Are you seeing that? I hope.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, great. All right. Well, it's wonderful to hear the success stories before I spoke. I am going to tell you the convoluted story of just one house that we managed to save. It's an ongoing story, and here we go. I'm going to read mostly my presentation because I can read faster than I can think. So when I told the architect who's working on this project of the title, he said, "I don't like that title. I prefer disassembling." So I decided I would at least pay him some homage by correcting my title to Disassembling the Joseph House to Save It. So here we go. This is a view of the house before everything started. And I'm going to go quickly through these slides here. This is as it was in 2021 when this whole story started. Here's the signboard now that was on that house, 1712 Joseph House, at a new site. And I'm sure most of you can look at that house and say, there's no way that house is from 1712. It looks like a Federalist house. Well, that's part of the story that I'm going to tell you now. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Hanover. Many people aren't. It's a South Shore town, a bit inland from the coast, and it's about 15,000 people at this point. We have one 17th century house, many 18th and 19th century houses, some interesting 20th century houses, and our only preservation tool, that is the Historical Commission's only preservation tool, is the demolition delay, which we have imposed a few times before with, I would say, in our case, not much success. So in any event, that's where we are. Let's keep going here. We first heard about this house in the spring of 2021, and here's it outlined in yellow on in gray on Main Street, which is one of the main and one of the old streets in Hanover. And I'm going to zoom in on it. Sorry for the crude outline, but that's just so you can see the extent of this property. It's 29 acres. And you can see the other house lots around it. Some are old houses. The old houses are usually the ones close up to the street. And then you can see how developments have been added along other usually cul-de-sacs. Anyway, it's very unusual to find a lot this large in Hanover, which is getting mostly built out on the land that's available. And you'll see at the very front of the lot, that is on the left, the old house and some outbuildings with it. So here it is again, just so you remember, it looks to be a Federalist house. This is the 1832 version at this point called the Sewell House. It was built by David Sewell. The town has a drone, which we use occasionally, and sometimes it's helpful to us in the Historical Commission. And what I want to point out is it has a back L, and this is very typical plan for Hanover houses, and I imagine a good number of other early 19th century houses on the South Shore at least, that is a one room wide or one room deep, that is, plus an L in the back, usually a kitchen L. And in this case, it has rooms above the L. So here the drone photo makes that quite clear. This property also had outbuildings on it, which are remnants, most of them, or part of the original farm, really. So these we know were used for various purposes when the house was a farm. Hanover folks did a lot of piecework, especially in the winter. And so we often call these little buildings cobbler shops because that's some of the work they were doing in the winter. Leather would be delivered to them. They'd work on it in the winter, and then the factor would come back and pick up the work that they had done. And that was the way they survived economically often. This is walking back on the lot and then looking toward the house, toward Main Street. I'm only about a quarter of the way back on this plot of land. It gets much more densely wooded, and there's some marshland as well behind me, really, but the extent of the lot is enormous. So the Hanover Commission, once we hear it's when a demolition application is filed with the building commissioner, that starts the process. The building commissioner notifies me, and typically if it's a house we're interested in, we'll convene a meeting on site. So we look through the house, and I'm going to go rather quickly through it. You can see that it was quite well cared for. The family that owned it for 20 years did maintain it. They did improve it as they saw fit. They kept many of the old features, as you can see. Here's graining on the inside of a door that we found. And we look in the basement, another view of the crawl space. We look in the attic. We look all over at the pieces of the house before we convene our meeting. And we do follow the steps that it was Patty who outlined the steps, including a first hearing to determine if a house is historically significant. And then if so, then we go on to the question of whether it's preferably preserved. So we at least use that process. And we've had the townline survey redone. It was rather poorly done in the 1980s, meaning by volunteers. I should recognize that volunteers are how we get work done, but it wasn't very complete at that point. And we got grants to help, including CPA and Mass Historical Commission, to upgrade our survey of town properties. We've done 2 phases. We're about to start the 3rd phase, and that will, we hope, complete the survey of all the historic buildings in Hanover. So this is the report we got back. Incidentally, it was Pal in Rhode Island who's done the 2 parts of our study. This certainly gave us information. We didn't have to do as much research on on the origins of the house as we might have had to do if they hadn't done it for us. Partly they relied on this book, which is called Houses of the Revolution by a resident of Hanover, Barbara Barker, who was my predecessor as Historical Commission Chair. And she knew more about Hanover than I will ever know, partly through her own research into earlier documents, partly through a lot of oral histories that she collected from the older residents, most of whom are gone at this point. And we don't have the opportunity to speak to them. And she recorded what she knew of the houses. When she says of the Revolution, what she really means is the houses that were existing in Hanover at the time of the Revolution. So in any event, she gave us a lot of information. And one of the significant points that she made and others have made is that embedded in this house is an older house, or the presumption of an older house. That would be the house, the Joseph House. And it's presumably, or was presumed to be in this back L, built probably in 1712 when Joseph was just 17 years old. And he eventually became the master carpenter for John Bailey's shipyard. Hanover has a long history of shipbuilding in the 19th century on the North River, and 18th century as well in this case. And so it was Joseph House who built a smallish house on this site. And then in the 1830s, it was drastically renovated by the Sewell family. Well, after Joseph House lived here, but in the house we can't see, it was then occupied by the owner of the shipbuilding yard, whose name was John Bailey, who had many children. And we found out that John Bailey, along with one of his sons, was a colonel in the Continental Army and served at the Dorchester Heights. He and his son crossed the Delaware River with Washington and was cited by Washington in letters for his bravery fighting the Hessians once they arrived on the other side of the river. He then became a select man in Hanover, and I think he might also have been town clerk. It also turns out that his son, another son, John Bailey II, was the founder of what we now know as the Bailey Clock Works. They built beautiful clocks. You can find some of them still in private collections, or they come up for auction occasionally, I guess I would say. And so in deliberating everything about this, we felt, the Historical Commission felt that, for one thing, we've been losing too many houses. The fabric of Hanover's history was being lost. And this family's connection to not just Hanover, but to American history seemed too important to let it go. So in June of 2021, we imposed the year-long demolition delay on this house. And so here begins the story. We're going back to that lot. Our hope was that the new owners of this property, who told us they didn't want to build anything on the property, they wanted to keep it in its natural state, which was surprising to many people here who assumed, of course, this is going to become a subdivision. Well, that wasn't their reason for buying it. It's extremely wealthy family, I will tell you. And in my conversations with them, they assured me they didn't plan to build anything. They just didn't want that house on the front of the property, which none of us could really understand. They just wanted it demolished. And we were hopeful that they would create what we call a retreat lot. Probably that's a term familiar to a number of you, where you carve out a portion of the property and sell it off, but keep the rest. And the hope was that they would carve out an acre in the front of the property that would contain the house and its outbuildings, just leaving a driveway along what would here be the top side of the property, giving them access to the back from Main Street. And there was even a cart path, or is even a cart path, right along that edge that could have become the driveway to get back to the property that they wanted to keep in its natural state. Well, the reality was, we talked many times with the attorney of the trust, and they just weren't interested. We just couldn't convince them to save this house in any form. We couldn't understand it, but that was their position. So we decided, I guess this was probably in October and November of 2021, with the demo delay clock ticking away to June of 2022, that the only way we were going to save this house was to move it, which seemed like an improbable possibility. But nevertheless, we decided that's what we were going to try. And so we made a list of developers and contractors who we knew had renovated old houses, some better than others. I contacted the folks on the HGTV show called Houses with History. Some of you may know that. They weren't particularly interested. It seemed like too big a job for them. And then I will tell you that this is where our luck changed. And I will say that it was through our chain of personal connections. One of the people on the historical commission was at a Sunday breakfast at the Masonic Lodge. And she was talking to a man from Norwell named David DeGhetto. David and Judy were sitting close to each other, and Judy said, "David, how would you like to move an old house?" And because she knew that David had done this in the past, he'd actually picked up a house and moved it from Hanover to, not Hanover, but it was a South Shore house, to Maryland. And so David said, "Well, I might be interested. Tell me more." And so she did tell him more. That began our conversations, and he brought in Michael Burry. So here is David on the left, and Michael Burry, who is teaches preservation carpentry at the North Bennett Street School. And they have a partnership that they've formed to work on a number of houses. And they decided they better go visit the house to see whether or not this was something they would really seriously take on. So I'm moving back to this aerial picture because when Michael visited the house with David, the owners were quite willing to let us poke around numerous times, I would say, in this empty house. By the way, the previous owner, I forgot to mention, who sold the house and the land for about $1.2 million. He was an elderly gentleman by this time. He and his family had moved, believed that this house could not be demolished. He didn't check that. He didn't verify that it couldn't be demolished, but he thought it was too historic and that just there was no way they could tear it down. Unfortunately, he was wrong. And so the new owners proceeded to file that demolition permit. Well, when Michael went to look at the house, he looked in the attic, he looked in the basement, because we told him about the 1712 house. He looked at where we thought the L started, and that must be the old house. He said, "That's not correct." That was based on what he saw in the attic and the framing. He said that old house went from the front to the back of the house. So what you're looking at here is pretty much what we believe was the 1712 house. It was just embedded in Federalist architecture to make it modern for its time in 1820. So when you look at the front, you just think it's a typical one-room deep Federalist house with a back L. That wasn't the case. Well, that just made it all the more interesting to us. It's not clear whether the house was actually a little bit elsewhere on this lot and it was picked up and moved into the location that the Sewells preferred their new house to be. That's not clear to us. But I will also tell you that David DeGhetto did dendrochronology on the house to date it. And I need to talk to him more about when he found, but he did confirm it's an early 18th century house. Okay, we go on to, let's see, what do I want to say here? So they said, we're in, we're willing to try moving this house. We'll need to find a new lot and we'll figure out how to move it. So David DeGhetto and I began a search for an appropriate lot, and we were using the wonderful set of state GIS maps, which you may be familiar with, which you can filter, you can do all manner of things with them, and you might be able to see the house lot. It's 733, kind of just to the right, a little bit up from the middle of this map. And so we looked at adjacent properties. We looked at who the owner was. We looked at wetlands. We looked at all manner of things. And sometimes we emailed, sometimes we literally knocked on doors trying to find land that he could buy that would be not too far away, an appropriate place for this house. In the end, that's not really how we found the lot. You can see the new lot in gray at the bottom right of the screen. It again came from a contact of ours in town, a longtime resident who was following our search and supportive of moving this house, said, well, I know another town resident, longtime resident who has a lot, and he might be willing to sell it for this purpose. And in fact, that's what happened. So David began talking to this other gentleman. they reached a agreement. This is on Union Street, which is another one of the older streets in town. And it had the right size. It's surrounded by some old houses, some new houses, so not a continuous fabric the way of older houses that's true on Main Street. But nevertheless, it seemed like a suitable lot for this house, and frankly, about the only one we could find. So David was able to make an agreement with the owner, and he signed a purchase and sale for this lot. So that was in the early winter of 2022, I guess I would say. The owners of the land were supportive of our work all along, and since they had they weren't going to build something, they allowed us to keep them informed, and they even said, we'll support the move of the house with $30,000, I believe, it might have been 40,000, the amount that it would have cost them to demolish the house. So this is the property looking from Union Street. This is not before he bought it. I can't find my early picture, but you can see it's a large space where some of the work is already, the site work has already begun, but that's the nature of the property that we had to work with. Now, David decided that what he wanted to do with this house was restore it as much as possible, but also add an addition onto it, provide amenities that would be what a family in Hanover would expect to find when they were going to buy a house, particularly what's being built now, which we have come to know as mini mansions. That's a kind of typical house built in new developments now. So that meant that large portions of the house would be retained and restored, but there would be an addition to this house as well. So here is the map of the journey we intended the house to travel along First Main Street and then onto Union Street. The 2 minutes, of course, is a car driving. That wasn't what we thought the house would take. Michael Burry had decided that the house could be moved on 2 flatbed trailers if it were cut in 2. So that was the intent, and they began exploring how that would happen. We also started meeting. I introduced David, who's not a Hanover resident, to all of the commissions and committees that would need to review this before it could happen. This is a meeting that took place where David and Michael were presenting. It was in June of 2022. So by this point, the demolition delay had expired. It had been a year. But again, the owners were willing to not do anything with the house. In fact, they sold David the house for $1 at this point, and they agreed that they wouldn't, therefore they couldn't demolish it because David owned the house. So he made a presentation to many people at this commission explaining what we wanted to do. We'd had preliminary talks with people. Town folk were surprisingly interested in, I shouldn't say surprisingly, interested and supportive. The building, the fire department, the police department, the building commissioner all wanted to figure out how to make this work. However, about a month later, this is the application that was presented to David and Michael. That's the front page of it, which would have to be signed by the board, the select board. And then here are the conditions that were required once everybody thought about it. Here you can see 28 different conditions that would have to be satisfied, and a major bond, liability bond on this page. Well, we were a bit surprised, I guess I would say that, by what was required of us, to the point that David Michael said, this is just impossible. We can't do this. We cannot move that house as we imagined along 2 streets and deliver it to the new property. So another bit of a change in course. They decided the only option would be to take the house apart piece by piece, carry it to the new site in pieces, and then reassemble it. So this is the beginning of the next section of my talk, which is how the heck did this happen? Well, it happened through the work of students at the North Bennett Street School. You may remember that Michael teaches there. They are required to do work on projects, historic preservation projects, And so it's my understanding they were paid to be the crew to take down this house. In the meantime, David and the architect were working on the permitting process for the septic system, for the review of the wetlands on the site. So, but this process of demolishing it, let's say disassembling it, began in fall of 2023, actually, we're that far, no, 2022. We're at fall of 2022. So here's the start of it. And we see here that the previous owners actually had taken the siding off or replaced it and put Tyvek under it. That's not 19th century work. But here you can see what it looked like once the Bennett Street School students started working on it. And I'll just go through these pictures rather quickly so you can see how it devolved or evolved as the work went along, the beautiful front stairway. And it wasn't surprising to us to see that many pieces were rearranged when the Sewells did their modernization renovation of the house. So a piece of wallpaper ended up here as a floorboard or the bottom of a floorboard. We uncovered this beautiful fireplace that we did not know, or mantle at least, for a fireplace we didn't even know was there. This was up in the bedroom, just covered up with plaster. Here are students knocking mortar off bricks from two of the fireplaces, two of the 19th century fireplaces, because all these bricks are going to be reused. Just another shot of the stairway and another. We had wonderful weather, I have to say, that November and December. It was no snow, sunny days, and not too cold. So the work progressed quite rapidly. I think it took them about 4 weeks to take apart this house, and everything, as you might assume, was numbered and documented as the house was taken apart. And then things were incrementally moved to the new site, and other things were put in storage. The one thing that wasn't demolished completely was this large fireplace, which was actually moved whole, lifted with a small crane onto the flatbed trailer and moved to the site in one piece. So that was the biggest piece, I believe, that went to the new house. So here again is the site a few years later, when you can see that one of the small outbuildings was moved there as well. And I mentioned that an architect had been hired by this point. And so he was working on the plans. His name is Leonard Baum. His practice is out of Rhode Island, and he's worked on the restoration, renovation of many historic houses in New England. So the next little bit that happened, this is a long story, is that this is Michael Burry again. Michael took a 3-month sabbatical, let's say, when he, along with a good dozen other preservation carpenters from all over the world, went to France. He and these other carpenters worked on the construction of the timber frame of what they call the forest, the wood roof over the stone vaulting of Notre Dame Cathedral. So he was gone for a number of months, which also slowed down progress of the work for a little bit. Nevertheless, who were we to say to Michael, oh, please don't go? It was an amazing chance for him. So now I'm jumping to January, this past January, on the site, like 3 weeks ago, when Michael and David convened a meeting. Again, here is one of the little houses from the previous site, which is now going to be used as the site office for the time being. It's going to stay on the site with the new old house. So they convened a meeting of folks that needed to be in on the early work on the house, meaning, well, there's the architect on the right, David's in the red coat, more North Bennett Street folks are here, and the contractor and some of his foremen for the beginning site work, that is pouring the basement. This house will have a full basement under it, and the concrete's going to be faced with the old granite from the original house, which, as you saw, really just had a crawl space mostly. So it'll have a full basement under it. And let me see here. This is, okay, this is Leonard Baum's plan. It might be a little hard for us to understand what's what. The old house is in the center of the screen with the with the L going up toward the top of the screen. And the new addition is on the left. You see the dotted lines there. That's the new addition. And then going down to the bottom of the screen, this is the first floor. You'll see there's a garage. There's a much bigger kitchen than was ever in the house, and bigger bathrooms, a stairway to the upper floor. And on top of the new addition on the left there, bottom, is basically an in-law apartment, because that's become very significant, popular in Hanover for families. And if Hanover ever allowed zoning for rental, this could be a separate rental apartment because it has a separate entrance to it. So they're thinking about the future of what will make this house livable with all kinds of conveniences, let's call them, that people would expect. But nevertheless, they're restoring all the old pieces as much as possible in it. Here's an elevation showing the top is the face of the L, as we saw in earlier photographs, and then below is the face you saw on Main Street with the section through the new addition that's going to be built on it. I know this is rather confusing, but just to show you that this is really happening. You can distinguish the addition in this case because of the vertical siding that you see here, purposely done to articulate what's new from what's old. And Leonard, the architect, told me that his intention is to have some Gothic revival reverberations, let's call them, in the new addition, so that it will be clear again what's the old house and what's the new house. This was taken last week. The formwork is in place for pouring the beginning of the basement of the house. And here is the same view. So that's the corner on the right bottom is the corner that you're seeing here in the right. The older house, which we thought of as the L on the right in this photo, is what's going to be facing Union Street in the new configuration. So it's being rotated on the site from what I might have expected originally when this was done. What I should also say is that there's not $1 of town money in this project. It's entirely funded by David DeGhetto and Michael Burry's corporation. And when it's finished, it will be sold on the market. A few other photos of what's stored on the site. That's some of the beams, the stonework from the foundation. There are the bricks that they were knocking the mortar off of. They're there on the site. I think some pieces aren't there yet. So now we're kind of backing out of the site. I'm taking this photo from Union Street. And again, we're back to the photo of the old Joseph House sign. So I've told you the story of how we got from that plaque on the house to where it is now sitting on the ground. So rather than disassembling, we're beginning the reassembly process for this house. The students from North Bennett Street are going to begin re-erecting the frame on March 11th, assuming the weather holds and the foundation has been poured and is set enough for them to be able to start that work. The estimate is that the work is going to take something like 18 to 20, maybe 24 months even to complete. It's a very complex process, as you might imagine, but that's where we are. We could not have gotten here without the help of many people and with their commitment and their expertise and adequate funding and people willing to take risks that seemed maybe impossible at some points. A network of contacts really that's local and some not so local, and frankly, patience. It's been a long process, and I must say, and good fortune in being able to find the people that were willing to take this on. So thank you for listening to this saga. I'm looking forward to being able to tell folks how it's ended. Thanks again.
Thank you for that, Peter. We really appreciated it. So now we're going to move on to questions. So if people have any questions. Oh, Peter, can you stop sharing your screen now? If people have any,
yes, I can.
If people have any questions, put them in the chat, and I'll relay them, though I will start with one I see. From Ryan, since you were a speaker, your question does definitely get asked. We won't get to all the questions, but he wanted to know, Peter, is there going to be a preservation restriction on the building or anything to sort of protect it in the future?
No, because Hanover has none. I have to say, we've never been able to establish a local historic district because there's no town money in it. We don't have the right to put a restriction on it. If there had been community preservation funds involved, as you probably know, for the historic preservation component, there would have been deed restrictions and review. But in this case, no. I wish that weren't the case in Hanover, but it is.
Okay, well, thank you. So then we have a couple questions. I've been sort of kind of grouping them together. So I'm going to ask two questions. I think mostly go to Patty, but I think also Ryan and Peter, you can jump in at any time. Sorry, now my screen is being weird. Why did it do this? So it's around the sort of compliance on how ensuring that people are complying with them. So we had some questions early on during Patty's thing. Sorry, I'm just trying to. So how does Salem staff address an applicant's claim that they are only demolishing 49.9% or similar of the exterior of a building, and then that they clearly demo 50% or more than is allowed during the project? Is that defined and everything? And then we had another sort of question about, how do you ensure that they are following the demo delays and sort of that kind of stuff? So I don't know, Patty, if you want to speak to that.
So, I think certainly defining or calculating the 50% threshold, while we haven't run up against that yet, I do envision that at some point somebody's going to push back and say, oh no, we're not doing 50%, we're doing 49%. So far in the couple of years that we've been working with this new ordinance, developers, architects have been relatively amenable to go through the process. If staff and the commission say, it appears from your plans that you're at that 50% threshold, but it is certainly something that we need to look at further to try to, be proactive for when somebody does push back and say, oh no, we're at 49%, not 50, how to address that.
Another sort of question related to that was, who actually determines if there is a violation that has taken place, and is there a public process, and are applicants essentially allowed to wait out a demolition delay while they are in violation of the law, or does it sort of shift the timeline?
I'm trying to understand the question. So
basically, I think what it is if say you have a 6-month, demo delay, and someone says, I'm only going to demo delay less than 50%, they demo like 70% of the building. Do they what happens? What is that mechanism? Who does the violation? And then does that demo delay still expire at the end of the 6 months, or because they were in violation, is it extended? Is how I'm reading that question.
Yeah, so we've had one instance where somebody, well, actually we've had a couple instances where somebody came in and said that one instance was they said they were taking down interior plaster. They took down the entire building to the foundation. That project, we worked with the building inspector and the zoning board of appeals because they had to go through other development review, and between the two other processes, we were able to force the owner to go through the historical commission for design comment on the new construction. For the other project that we had recently where somebody was only taking off a small portion that didn't meet the 50% threshold, and then the building came down to the ground, We did work with the building inspector because it does become a building inspector enforcement issue. And in that instance, we were not as successful to get it to go through the demolition delay review process. So, you know, we've had limited success in enforcement to date.
Okay. So then another question that we've had is sort of related to preservation efforts, and community engagement. And so can you explain the requirements again? This is for Ryan or, for Patty or Peter, that owners secure their building during the delay, and like, how do you talk to them about what the definition of securing is and what they can and cannot do during the delay process?
You know, I'll jump in first. I will say that in Salem recently, for those buildings where the delay has been invoked, the buildings were either in good, secure condition or are actively being used, that we haven't had to work with the building inspector to ensure that they're secured either to the elements or to vandalism or, you know, potential destruction. So we have not had to go through that yet, but, you know, as part of the revision of the ordinance, I felt that was very important to put in there because, you know, I envision at some point somebody's just going to go through demolition by neglect and just let it, you know, deteriorate over that 12 or 18 months. I don't know if Ryan or Jeff has had any other experience.
I'll also just jump in really quickly, and you know, a lot of these issues come back to basic like building and health code violations that, you know, the building commissioner or others in town should be enforcing. For instance, if the, you know, there's a fire suppression system or, you know, fire alarm system in the building that's runs on electricity, it's hardwired, and you shut the electricity off to the building, you know, your fire chief is probably going to be pretty concerned that you now have a building in there that doesn't have any form of fire alarm or fire protection system. So making sure that you're kind of in touch with those folks who are enforcing those sort of basic safety issues is really important, like the building commissioner, like the fire chief, because it can be them that, you know, enforces it more than just the demolition delay bylaw itself.
I would add that, yes, having a good relationship with the building commissioner is very important. We've seen developers just wait out the demolition delay if they can. They're not going to put any improvements in. We've seen how interesting houses that are in just such bad shape that the cost of renovating them would be phenomenal. I think to myself, if this were Cambridge or some other sophisticated town that had the market and had historic districts, this house probably would be saved because there would be the economics in place and the restrictions in place to do so. But when I look at some of these houses and think if somebody bought it, they couldn't live here while they're renovating it, that adds to the costs of trying to restore some of these old places. And we've just had to let some go because we could not see the alternatives to how the heck they would be saved. I'm sorry to say, but that's what happens here.
Medford has the added benefit of partnering up with not only the building commissioner, but the two community boards. We have a zoning board of appeals and we have a community development board. Both of those boards have been very supportive of our demo delay and in actuality have kicked applicants back to us who try to circumvent and continue on with planning processes to say just work with the commission first to get your building in order, because if it's not coming down, if you're simply just going to wait out the delay, it's best to work with them. So they've been supportive of us, and that's been very helpful to prevent them from moving forward without our permission and really enforcing and driving home that the 18-month delay is to start with the commission and figuring out what is best for the building.
No, I think that brings up a really good point, Ryan, that, you know, our historical commissions, I feel often operate as sort of separate boards and commissions, but they're part of the entire sort of planning and zoning ecosystem for many of our towns, particularly if you do have a demolition delay bylaw or you're looking to implement one. There were two questions, Ryan, that are tied that I think were specifically for you. Is how long does it take to select a consultant and complete the form for the MHC inventory? And how does that fit into the time frame for the demo delay and the hearing? And how is the consultant for the MHC inventory form paid for?
Okay, yep. So I'll just preface this with the very first time that you do this, it's going to be longer than once you get into a regular time period. So for the city of Medford, we have an annual budget that basically we can use to hire a consultant. So for MHC inventory forms, we set a standard rate. And then we basically approach a historic preservation consultant to ask if that rate is fine with them. And if they say yes, then we contract with them with just a basic short proposal that says, you know, you're doing this building, it's X amount of dollars, and the final product is given to us usually within 30 days. So with most demo delay bylaws, you're under the gun. So we formally receive our applications at a meeting. That's when we start the official clock, because we file it on behalf of the applicant with the city clerk's office. And then we have 30 days to make a determination of significance. So we have to turn that form around in less than 30 days. So, you know, it's putting a lot of demand on the consultants, but there's, you know, a fair amount of people that do this type of work. So, you know, we in Medford, we hire a consultant for $500 per inventory form. So I think that's a fair amount for the amount of research that we get. And usually they turn them around in 30 days. So, and we just to build on that, we have more than one that we ask. So I would highly encourage you. It's nice to have one person working in the community, but it's always good to have a backup just in case they're not available.
If you use town money, I understand, or if it's CPA money or Mass Historical Commission grant money, if it's over $10,000, you have to put it out for in effect bidding. So there's a wonderful structure that Mass Historical Commission provides for. I'm talking about the Form B survey forms. When we've done the 2 phases, we've done about 120 houses at a time for about a $30,000 contract. There's a rigorous involvement by Mass Historical Commission, which is helpful. There's a lot of paperwork. If you're volunteer commission, such as we, with zero budget and almost zero help from the planning department, it's a lot of work that you put in to get these in place. But as I said, we've done 2 pieces of a 3-phase project. So we at least have these Form Bs from many of the houses in town, which we go to if we're not, especially if we're not familiar with the house. It tells you nothing about the interior. They don't do anything on the interior. They just look on the outside of the house. I think they do a phenomenal amount of work for what they're paid. And as I said, we use PAL for both of our phases. They won the award. So they're useful. We're trying to get out in front by, we've identified like the 10 top buildings we don't want to lose in Hanover, and trying to have conversations with those owners about what their intentions are and whether we can offer them any alternatives. So I can't say that that's been particularly productive yet, but I mean, we're trying to be proactive and look at some of these houses that we think are significant before they apply for the permit, the demo permit, which is what triggers our official involvement in the process. At least in our town, that's how it works.
Thank you for that, Peter. I think that goes again to like why preservation planning is so important. Like if we try and save everything, we save nothing. And so let's really target our efforts, especially since so many of us are volunteers with limited time and resources for our commissions. We're almost at time, so we're going to be sort of wrapping up. So again, if you have questions, you can reach out to all of us individually. We will be sending a follow-up email. with the contact stuff. But I just want to uplift one of the comments that Jen put into the chat, which is for MHC, if things are included in the MACRIS that are demolished, they are not removed from the MACRIS list. It is just noted that they were demolished. So again, you know, let MACRIS and MHC know when things are demolished, but also make sure that your, you know, resources are inventoried, right? Like these are used in our planning processes. And if they are not in MACRIS, that is really hard for people outside of your community, even in your community, to know these resources exist and can plan appropriately at the, you know, local, state, and federal level. So with that, I just want to thank our speakers for so graciously giving us their time today and their expertise in sharing these really exciting examples, because I know demolition delay bylaws is a hot topic in our region and everything. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you to everyone for sharing your Tuesday morning with us and joining us, but also again, just for your service on the different boards and commissions and other sort of community work that you do that brought you here today. So we will again send a follow-up email with the recording of this session so you can share it if others were not able to join us today. We'll also have the PDFs of the presentations along with contact information, and we will let you know when we select the next date and topic for the next Eastern Mass Historical Commission Coalition. So thank you and have a wonderful Tuesday.